Parables, Comfort, and Promise. The Third Testament, Revelations of Jesus Christ, Chapter 65. Parable of the Poor Administrators. Thus saith the Lord. A crowd of the hungry, sick, and naked approached the house in search of charity. The owners of the house constantly prepared food to serve the travelers at their table. The owner, lord and master of those lands, came to preside over the banquets. Time passed, and the needy always found their sustenance and shelter in that house. One day, the owner noticed that the water served at the table was cloudy, that the dishes served were not healthy and tasty, and that the tablecloths were stained. He called then for those in charge of preparing the table and asked them, "Have you looked at these linens, tasted these dishes, and drunk this water?" "Yes, sir," they replied. "Before you give it to these hungry people, then have your children eat of it, and if they find these servings to be good, you may give them to the visitors." The children took the bread, the fruits, and whatever there was on the table, but the taste was not pleasant, and there was discontent and rebellion against the supervisors and harsh protests. The owner then said to those who were waiting, "Come, wait beneath this tree. I will offer you the fruits of my garden, and morsels that will please your taste." And to the supervisors he said, "Clean that which is stained. Get rid of the bitter taste you have left in the mouths of those who have deceived. Make amends to me for this, for I order you to receive all those who hunger and thirst, and offer them the finest dishes and clean water. And you have not complied. Your work is not pleasing me." The lord of those lands then prepared himself the banquet. The bread was satisfying, the fruit healthy and ripe, the water clean and refreshing. Then he invited those who waited, beggars, the sick and lepers, and all ate with great pleasure. Soon they were healthy and free of their ills, and decided to stay on that farm. They became laborers and began to work the lands, but they were weak and did not let themselves be guided by the advice of the owner. They mixed different seeds, and the crops degenerated. The wheat was choked by weeds. And when the time of the harvest came, the owner approached again and said, "What are you doing? To you I gave only the care of the house for receiving visitors. The planting you have done is not good. There are others who are in charge of the lands. Go and clean the fields of thorns, bushes, and weeds. Then return to caring for the house. The spring has dried up. The bread is not wholesome, and the fruit is bitter. Do with the travelers as I have done with you. And when you have fed and healed those who come to you, when you have made the pain of your brothers disappear, I will bring you to rest in my mansion." Crossing the desert to the great city. Two travelers walked slowing along an extensive desert. Their feet were painful from the burning sands. They were headed towards a distant city. Only the hope of reaching their destination encouraged them in their arduous journey. Their bread and water were nearly exhausted. The younger of the two began to weaken, and he begged his companion to continue the journey alone, because his strength was failing him. The older traveler tried to encourage the young man, telling him that perhaps they would find an oasis soon, where they would regain their lost strength. But the latter did not take heart. He thought of leaving him in that lonely place, but in spite of being also weary, he placed his dejected companion upon his shoulders and continued the journey laboriously. When the young man was rested, thinking of the weariness he was causing the one who was carrying him upon his shoulders, he let go his neck, took him by the hand, and thus they continued the journey. A great faith encouraged the old one's heart, which gave him strength to overcome his weariness. As he had foreseen, there appeared on the horizon an oasis under whose shade the coolness of a spring awaited them. Finally, they reached it, and they drank from that strengthening water until they were satisfied. They slept a refreshing sleep, and on awakening, they felt that their weariness had disappeared. Neither did they experience hunger nor thirst. They felt peace in their heart and strength to reach the city they were seeking. They would not have wanted to leave that place, but it was necessary to continue the journey. They filled their flasks with that pure, clear water and continued their journey. The old traveler, who had been the young man's support, said, "Let us use the water we are carrying sparingly. It is possible that we may meet along the path some pilgrims, overcome by fatigue, dying of thirst or sick, and it will be necessary to offer them what we are carrying." The young man protested, saying that it would not be sensible to share that which might not even be enough for them. That in such a case, since they had gone through so much effort to obtain that precious element, they could sell it at the price they desired. Not satisfied with this answer, the old one replied that if they expected to have peace in their spirit, they should share the water with those in need. Annoyed, the young man said that he preferred to consume the water in his flask by himself before sharing it with anyone whom he should encounter along the way. Again, the presentiment of the old one was fulfilled, for they beheld before them a caravan composed of men, women, and children who were lost in the desert and were on the verge of perishing. The kind old man promptly approached those people to whom he gave water to drink. The travelers felt strengthened at once. The sick opened their eyes to thank the old traveler, and the children ceased weeping for thirst. The caravan arose and continued its journey. There was peace in the heart of the generous traveler, while the other one, seeing his flask empty, with alarm said to his companion that they should return in search of the spring to replenish the water which they had consumed. "We should not turn back," the good traveler said, "for if we have faith, we will find a new oasis further on." But the young man doubted. He was afraid, and he preferred to say goodbye to his companion right there to go back in search of the spring. Those who had been brothers in a common cause were separated, while one continued forward in the pathway filled with faith in his destiny. The other, thinking that he might die in the desert, ran toward the spring, obsessed with the fear of death in his heart. At last he arrived, panting and fatigued, and with satisfaction he drank until he quenched his thirst, forgetting his companion whom he allowed to go on alone, as well as the city which he had renounced, deciding to remain and live in the desert. It was not long after that a caravan, composed of exhausted men and women, passed nearby. They anxiously approached to drink from the waters of the spring. But suddenly a man appeared who would not allow them drink and rest unless they paid him for those benefits. It was the young traveler who had taken possession of the oasis, making himself the lord of the desert. Those men listened to him with sadness, for they were poor and they could not buy that precious treasure which would satisfy their thirst. Finally, depriving themselves of what little they carried, they bought a little water to quench their desperate thirst and continued their journey. Soon, that man converted himself from a lord to a king, for those who passed that way were not always poor. There were also powerful ones who could give a fortune for a glass of water. This man gave no further thought to the city that was beyond the desert, and much less to his fraternal companion who had carried him upon his shoulders, saving him from perishing in the wilderness. One day he saw a caravan approaching that surely was headed toward the great city, but to his surprise he observed that those men, women, and children were walking filled with strength and joy, singing a hymn. This man could not understand what he beheld, and his surprise was even greater when he saw the one who had been his traveling companion marching at the head of the caravan. The caravan stopped in front of the oasis, while the two men looked at each other, greatly surprised. Finally, he who dwelt in the oasis asked his former companion, "Tell me, how is it possible that there are people who pass through this desert without being thirsty or experiencing weariness?" The reason was that inwardly he wondered what would become of him the day when no one approached to ask for water or lodging. The good traveler said to his companion, "I reached the great city, but along the way not only did I encounter the sick, but also the thirsty, the lost, the weary, and revived everyone with the faith which has revived me. And thus, from oasis to oasis, one day we reached the gates of the great city. There I was summoned by the Lord of that kingdom, who, seeing that I was familiar with the desert, and that I showed pity for all travelers, gave me the mission to return and be a guide and advisor along the difficult crossing of the travelers. Here I am, once again guiding another of the caravans I must take to the great city. And you? What brings you here?" he asked the one who had remained at the oasis. Ashamed, the latter was silent. Then the good traveler said to him, "I am aware that you have made this oasis yours, that you sell its waters, and that you charge for shelter. These benefits are not yours. They were placed in the desert by a divine power, to be used by anyone who needed them. Do you see these multitudes? They do not have need of the oasis, because they do not feel thirsty, nor are they fatigued. It is enough that I transmit to them the message that the Father of the great city conveys through me for them to arise, finding strength at every step, with a goal that they have to reach that kingdom. Leave the spring to those who thirst, so that those who suffer the rigors of the desert may find rest and quench their thirst in it. Your pride and selfishness have blinded you, but what good has it been to be the lord of this small oasis, when you live in this lonely place, and have deprived yourself of knowing the great city that both of us were seeking? Have you already forgotten that goal which was for both of us?" That man, listening in silence to the one who had been his faithful and unselfish companion, burst into tears, for he felt repentant because of his faults, and tearing off his false finery, he went in search of the starting point, which was where the desert began, in order to follow the path which would take him to the great city. But now he walked along the pathway illuminated by a new light, which was of faith and love toward his fellow men. End of the parable. I am the Lord of the great city, and Elijah is the old one of my parable. He is the voice of one crying in the wilderness. It is he who again manifests himself among you, in fulfillment of the revelation that I give you in the transfiguration on Mount Tabor. Follow Elijah, O my beloved people, and everything will change in your life. All will be transformed in your worship and ideals. Did you believe that your imperfect worship would be eternal? No, disciples. Tomorrow, when your spirit beholds the great city on the horizon, he will say, like his master, "My kingdom is not of this world." Parable: the magnanimity of a king. Once there was a king who was surrounded by his subjects, celebrating a victory over a rebellious people who now were to become his vassals. The king and his subjects cheered their victory, and the king spoke, saying, "The strength of my arm has triumphed and enlarged my kingdom. Yet I will love the conquered as I do you, and give them great lands of my dominion to cultivate the vine. And just as I love them, I wish you to love them also." Time passed, and among that people, conquered by the love and justice of that king, rose up a man who rebelled against his lord, and who tried to kill him while he slept, though he only succeeded in wounding him. Faced with his crime, that man fled, terrified to hide himself in the darkest jungles, while the king wept for the ingratitude of his subject, and for his absence, because he loved him greatly. In his flight, the man fell prisoner of a people who were enemies of the king. And when he was accused of being a subject of that king, whose authority he did not recognize, he proclaimed loudly that he was fleeing because he had killed that king. But he was not believed, and was sentenced to be tortured and burned at the stake. Just as, already bloodied, he was to be given to the fire, the king happened to pass by with his subjects in search of the rebel. Seeing what was happening, the Lord raised his arm and called to the executioners, "What is it you do, you rebellious people?" And at the majestic and commanding voice of the king, the rebels prostrated themselves before him. The ungrateful subject, who was tied to the stake, awaiting the execution of his sentence, was surprised and fascinated to see that the king had not died, and now approached step by step to untie him. The king took the rebel from the stake and cured his wounds. He poured wine between his lips, dressed him in new white vestments, and after depositing a kiss on his forehead, said to him, "My subject, why did you leave my side? Why did you wound me? Do not answer in words. I only wish you to know that I love you, and I say to you now, come and follow me." The people who witnessed that scene of charity, astonished and converted, exclaimed, "Hosanna! Hosanna!" and declared themselves obedient subjects of the king. That people thereafter received nothing but good from their Lord, and the subject who had once rebelled, surprised at receiving so much love from his king, surrendered to his perfect works and determined to return those proofs of limitless love by loving and venerating his Lord forever. End of the parable. There, people, you have my word clearly. Men struggle against me, and thereby lose their friendship for me. What damage have I done to the men? What harm brings them my doctrine or my law? Understand that as many times as you offend me, the same number of times you are forgiven. But you must then forgive your enemies as many times as they offend you. I love you, and if you take a step away from me, I take a step towards you. And if you close the doors of your temple against me, I will cat at them until you open them for me to enter. Blessings. Blessed is the one who patiently endures his sorrow, for he will find in his own meekness the strength to continue to carry his cross along his path of evolution. Blessed is the one who humbly endures humiliation and knows how to forgive those who have offended him, for I will bring justice to him. But woe unto those who judge the deeds of their brothers, for they in turn will be judged. Blessed is the one who, obeying the first mandate of my law, loves me above everything created. Blessed is the one who allows me to judge his cause, whether it is just or unjust. Blessed is he who humbles himself on earth, for I will exalt him. Blessed is he who is slandered, for I will testify of his innocence. Blessed is he who gives testimony of me, for I will bless him. And he who is rejected for practicing my doctrine, I will recognize him. Blessed be those who, falling and rising, are weeping and blessing me. Those hurt by their own brethren confide in my deep within their heart. Those small and sorrowful, ridiculed, but meek and for that reason strong in spirit, are truly my disciples. Blessed is he who praises the Lord's will. Blessed is he who praises his own bitter circumstances, knowing that it cleanses his stains, for he is pressing his steps for ascending the spiritual mountain. All await the light of a new day, the dawn of the peace that will be the beginning of a new era. The oppressed await the day of their liberation, while the sick hope for the balsam that will return to them their health, strength, and happiness. Blessed are those who know how to wait until the last moment, for to them what they have lost will be returned with increase. I bless their waiting, for it is proof of their faith in me. Blessed are the faithful. Blessed those who remain strong until the end of the trials. Blessed are those who have not wasted the strength imparted by my teaching, for they, in the bitter times to come, shall pass through the vicissitudes of life with strength and light. Blessed are those who praise me on the altar of creation, and those who know how to receive the consequences of their faults with humility, not attributing them to divine punishment. Blessed are those who know how to do my will and accept their trials with humility. All of them shall love me. Exhortation for development. Blessed are those who, with humility and faith, ask me for their spirits to progress, for they will receive that which they request of their Father. Blessed are those who know how to wait, for my charity will come to their hands at the right moment. Learn how to ask and also how to wait, knowing that nothing escapes my charity. Trust that my will shall be manifested in each one of your needs and trials. Blessed are those who dream of a paradise of peace and harmony. Blessed are those who have scorned and seen with indifference the trivialities of the superfluous, the vanities and passions that do no good for man, and less for his spirit. Blessed are those who have set aside the fanatical practices that lead nowhere, and have distanced themselves from old and erroneous beliefs to embrace the absolute truth, naked and clean. I bless those who renounce the external to enter into meditation, love, and inner peace, for they understand that peace is not offered by this world, but can be found inside yourselves. Blessed are you in whom the truth does not inspire fear nor scandal, for I tell you truly that the light will fall like a cascade upon your spirit, to sate forever your thirst for light. Blessed is he who listens, assimilates, and practices my teachings, for he shall know how to live in the world, as well as how to die to this world, and when the time comes, knows to awaken to eternity. Blessed is he who delves deeply into my word, because he has learned the reason for the pain, and the meaning behind the restitution and atonement. And so, instead of becoming desperate or blaspheming, and thereby increasing his sorrow, he stands up full of faith and hope for the struggle, so that the weight of his guilt is every day less, and the cup he must drain less bitter. Serenity and peace are for those men of faith who accept the will of their Father. Your advancement or evolution will permit you to find my truth and perceive my divine presence, in the spiritual just as in each one of my works. I will then say to you, blessed are those who know how to see me in everything, for it is they who truly love me. Blessed are those who know how to feel me with their spirit, and even through their material form, for these are the ones who have sensitized their entire being, those who have truly become spiritualized. You know that from my high throne I wrap the universe in my peace and my blessings. All is blessed by me at every hour and during each instant. No curse or abomination has ever nor will come from me for my children. And so, without distinguishing between sinners and the just, I make my blessing, my kiss of love and peace descend upon all of them. My peace be with you.